Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. You know what, folks? We've got a great show for you tonight. Not only are we going to overanalyze yet another Weirdos movie, tonight, the arty auteurs Wes Anderson's Asteroid City, but we've got a very special bonus spoiler-free review. But first, speaking of bonuses, let's welcome every Baba's baby bonus favorite, my co-host, Mr. Jim Chebarecki Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Pretty good.
Yikes. I should get the script out of your face.
Oh. Uh-oh.
Anyway.
And I'm unmuted?
You are.
Good.
Jim.
It's like a flight check.
It is. Are the wheels up? Hey,
Propellers?
look at that. Your head's cut off now. I will fix that as we go along. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we see each other this afternoon?
Yes, we did. We spent, I haven't been into an afternoon movie for a while, but yeah, we went to the movies this afternoon. Did you want to?
That's right. Folks, tonight, this afternoon, Jim and I did. We went and checked out a matinee. We saw Napoleon, film that's got causing a bit of controversy.
Mm-hmm.
Many talk pieces about its historical accuracy or inaccuracy. Certainly what little, Jim, we saw of it, whoopsie, wrong person. What little we saw of it, Jim, I think you'd agree, like there's moments where it's like, yeah, I don't think that's the way the historical record went.
Yeah.
But first of all,
Yeah.
let's get a spoiler-free review that isn't really so much about the historical aspects as just whether or not you think it's what do you think of it on its own as a movie? Why don't you give us your take?
Well, yeah, it's one of those biopics that you sort of, because it is a biopic, even though the life is larger than most. It's one of those things you look forward to, and then it runs into I think for me, the trap of doing the check marks, right? Did we cover this? Did we cover that?
Yeah.
Did we cover Waterloo? Did we cover Josephine properly? This, that, the other thing. And so I think, as opposed to focusing on a narrow band of someone's life, it tries to do too much. And for something about a general, and generals that have to choose and stick with something strategically, this movie is sort of all over the map. I don't think it sticks with any one thing, and I think that's its ultimate downfall. It tries to cover too much, like a bad general might, and instead of concentrating his troops, the troops are all over the place. And ultimately, I think there was stuff to like about it, but I was kind of not. I was unmoved. There was not any real part that moved me. So,
I don't know. For myself, Jim, I gotta tell you, after the first hour, I could have left. After the first hour, all the way into, as we slip into the third act, I was starting to drift off.
Yeah.
And I think for me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll add after.
For me, and I mentioned this after the theater, it's like, you know what? One of the best definitions of a story I have ever heard is, a story recounts the struggle of a hero, a protagonist, a hero fighting an obstacle to achieve a goal. And I think this film fails right out of the gate. The Ridley Scott's interpretation of Napoleon here, he is not heroic in any way. He's not even interesting. He's not, how can I put it? You know what? He's not a bastard. But he is whiny. He is never, you don't feel ever that he's in command. Yeah. And so right there, it's like, I don't know why I'm still watching. Oh, right, I paid for it. That's why I'm still watching.
See how it turns out.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. It's like, I get that we do know how it turns out for him. He does. He may have conquered Europe once, but he never keeps it. That said, Jim, this film, unlike, say, something like Apollo 13, you also know how it's going to end. But holy, does that film still make you wonder how it's going to turn out?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I hope they make it back to Earth. This one, I have zero interest. There's zero tension. I don't even know what his goal is, really. You don't know what his goal is. You don't know. Yeah, there's just not enough to keep me there. So I can certainly, and while there's a couple of historical points where, and I love, me, Jim, I love France and I love the French. At the same time, I'm no big fan of their, that former imperial glory, their idea of prestige. I'm no fan of that. And that said, it's like, whoa, Mr. Scott, what do you have against Napoleon, and through Napoleon, maybe about the French? Because this Napoleon, it's almost like he took all the tropes that have been debunked about his physical size. He's not as, his average height for a man of that time. And he made the character in his movie Napoleon small, emotionally small. Yeah. He's petty. He's, like you said, unfocused, unorganized. And it's like, I could kind of see that maybe in his personal life, and this film does spend a lot of time on his personal life, but I do not in any way, at no time is it ever explained to us, and I certainly don't buy it with this character, that he conquered Europe, except that he did, know? So, what did you want to add before we give our see it or skip it?
Yeah, I hesitate to use the word boring. I think it's a really like a poor word, and it's one of those things that I'm the type of parent that would say to my kids, only boring people say boring, but it was verging on boring in the middle there. And it's not that the topic's not uninteresting. I mean, you have the locations, you have the look. It had beautiful visually. This movie
worked hard to make an interesting subject.
Oh, the costumers did a hell of a job. It had a texture to it. But at the same time, just, there was just you never felt like you were on one track. There was literally, after they divorce, there's literally a scene where he goes, meets her at the door for about 30 seconds. They go up into the room, then they talk. Hey, that was quite a romance we had, wasn't it? Yeah, 30 seconds. And he says goodbye, 30 seconds. At no time is there any kind of, I was praying for like 8 lines in a row, just like a tennis rally. Like, just give me a 3-minute scene.
At no time.
3 minutes of dialogue.
Or I shouldn't say no time, but very rarely do any scenes, it's almost like well, this happened. And then several years later, this happened. You don't feel any narrative drive.
No,
like scene kind of goes, oh, because of this happening, this had to happen. And you feel like you're getting swept up in it.
Yeah. There's no transition. Like, they just, there was just that. I don't need a star wipe or whatever they call them every time. Like Lucasfilm favors, but it was very workmanlike and very sort of task oriented. and you didn't understand sort of the passion or the
Well,
motivation of the character. And yeah,
well,
the battle
yeah,
scenes were cool. I mean, but what's the ultimate
but
hook
that's not a
here?
movie. That is
Yeah.
not a movie.
No.
Cool battle scene, cool
Yeah.
spectacle. If I don't care
Mhm.
about the guy driving the battle scene, and I never care about Napoleon, never care
Yeah.
about this individual the movie's ostensibly about,
Yeah.
then yeah, who cares? The cinematography comes to nothing. The production design comes to nothing. The costumes, nothing. It all means nothing because there's a character that is I have zero interest in seeing what happens to next.
Yeah.
Going back to what we're saying, I know how it plays out. I'd rather read a book about the actual guy, even if
Yeah.
that's up for debate on what he was really like. I'd
Yeah.
rather read that. Read a history book. Well, Jim, let me ask you this: see it or skip it for you.
I'll quote a line from the movie. Destiny brought me this lamb chop. Skip it.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, folks, it's a big skip it for us. And folks, we did. Jim and I were actually talking about watching this movie in the theater, and then we'd wait to do a big over analysis of it when potentially a longer version, an even more fleshed out version, would come out on Apple Plus. But by the end of this movie, I was like, yeah, we don't need to do that. I couldn't ask anyone to sit for even more of this.
Yeah.
So that's about all we've got to say about this flick. Let's talk about Jim. Or actually, let's get to this flick. Let's get to
Sure.
the movie at hand, Asteroid City. Here's the log line, folks, from IMDb. Following a writer on his world famous fictional play about a grieving father who travels with his tech obsessed family to small rural asteroid city to compete in a junior stargazing event, only to have his worldview disrupted forever. Yeah. Jim, yet another atrocious log line from the fine folks at IMDb. Notwithstanding the framing device, I would say, Jim, that this flick, it really is about a family that gets stuck in a small town, perhaps Area 51 adjacent, somewhere in Arizona or Nevada, New Mexico, the American Southwest.
Mhm.
And they get stuck there because of a car breakdown. The eldest boy, wanted to be there anyway for a kind of science fair. The junior stargazers / space cadets.
Yeah.
And of course, stuff happens. And we'll get more into that.
Sure.
But why don't you give us an idea of who's in front of and behind the camera here?
Well, of course, it's a Wes Anderson property there, and it's
Wes
comes from
Anderson joint.
Wes Anderson and Roman Coppola. Coppola, yeah, right. Came up with the story. It's got Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, tons of people. Steve Carell, Jeff Goldblum's got a small part. Willem Dafoe's in it. Tom Hanks, I quite liked in this. Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Adrian Brody. It's kind of
Keep
amazing
going.
the people he can. Yeah, Liev Schreiber is kind of cool as a cranky dad. Hope Davis, Rupert Friend, Maya Hawke, recent Academy Award nominee Hong Chow, isn't it? Margot Robbie's got a part. Shows up sort of towards the end, and Tony Revolori, who's been, who's part of the cabal, the Wes Anderson cabal. He's in it as well, and a lot of good talent. Am I forgetting anybody? I think I got most of. Jake Ryan plays Jason Schwartzman's son, and he's got sort of he's probably the unknown with the biggest part, or unknown to me anyway.
Yeah.
So apologize. But yeah, and
There's a
cinematography by Robert Yeoman,
Yeah.
I should mention.
There's
Music
a-
by Alexander Desplat. So
Yeah. There's a blinker, you'll miss it. He was just sitting there. Yeah, I don't even know if you could call it a cameo, but Bob Balaban,
yes, yeah,
you know, and just all he did was sit there. Who didn't we see? None of the Wilson brothers that I saw.
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
And who else? Of course, Steve Zissou.
Bill Murray.
But I kind of wondering if it was one of those, it's why Tom Hanks was in it, because Bill Murray, it's like, yeah, it's problematic, problematic casting nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
But all right, Jim, we're gonna jump into the spoiler zone. But first, let's just a quick shout out to the wonderful folks in our chat. We have, of course, Dragon Movie Guy.
Hey, Brian. Geno Smith is the best.
And then, of course, our good friend from Kuwait City, Ahmed, Jelly Duck 100.
Yes. Hello.
Jelly Duck! Jelly Duck and DMG!
They're both in places that are quite warmer than us right now, but it's actually not too bad. So
you're absolutely right, Mr. Chiboyko. All right, Jim, I think it's time for the spoiler zone. And I wanted to ask you, I guess in general, first, or keep this in mind, and this is for the chat as well. What do you think Wes Anderson is trying to communicate, not just with his themes? They seem to be reasonably straightforward. It's almost always, all his stories have a kind of family theme and family disruption, you know, disconnecting and connecting and trying to find human connections. The thing you're trying to pick off there is still there if you're wondering.
That's fine. I just noticed it.
But especially with this film, it's like, what do you think with his aesthetic? Because it's like a film school. Hey, do you want to know what aesthetic is? Wes Anderson. You can pick out a Wes Anderson film a mile away, even more than I would say Martin Scorsese or Stanley Kubrick. Even Steven Spielberg, Jim, I would say as far as auteurs go, and they are auteurs, I think it's easier. Their aesthetic is nowhere near as obvious or as overt as Wes Anderson. So where do you think his aesthetic, his look fits into, like what is he doing with the aesthetic that fits into the themes he's exploring? Or is it like a whole other thing that's going on? And you don't necessarily need to give me an answer right now, but I'd love for you to, if we could kind of explore that as we talk about this movie. Another thing I do have to ask is, what is your favorite Wes Anderson film? You, I think, are a lot more of a fan than I am of his.
Yeah. I actually have a number of his his movies on, some of his content. No, I have some of his movies on. I have the Criterion discs. It makes for a good.
Really?
Good Christmas present for this guy when people say, "What do you want for Christmas?" You know, or that kind of thing. With my family, because I'm, apparently hard to shop for. But anyway, so I do have a number of
your presents, so no Criterion.
No, not a hint.
Anderson stuff
but,
for
and
you
I don't
this
need,
time around.
Yeah, I don't need every one of his movies, of course. I going to New York this summer, I rewatched The Royal Tenenbaums, which is a very New York movie. And I have to say that I quite enjoyed it. I didn't quite get up to their mansion is in the middle of Harlem. I did the research, found out where it was, and didn't quite make it there. But I watched it again, and it holds up, and it's similar to a lot of his other movies. I was just reading some analyses of him. He may be a little bit deadpan. That doesn't mean he's emotionless, though. There's a lot of sort of it's struck through with, often anger or loss. There's a lot of lost parents or people who've just passed away in his movies. So the characters are ultimately probably a little bit, don't want to use this term lightly, a little bit PTSD, it's just usually just past. There's suicidal ideation in Royal Tenenbaums, for instance. And there's a lot of people that are sort of not dealing with things. That's usually the sort of the struggle that the movies depict. So Royal Tenenbaums is really strong for me still. Loved watching it again. Like I was just like, yeah, I'm getting into this. Gene Hackman faking being sick and saying, yeah, I have a real bad case of cancer. It just doesn't specify which, but just says in general. Rushmore is another one that was probably the one of the first strongest ones. I've seen Bottle Rocket, but it didn't quite have what we see now, I think, as Wes. And it's been years since I've seen that, so don't quote me on that. But I'd probably say either those two are good. Moonrise Kingdom's a good one. I haven't watched. Anyway, so I'd say Royal Tenenbaums. Sorry.
Okay. Myself, I couldn't get into the Royal Tenenbaums. I would say if I have a favorite, it's I enjoyed Rushmore. And, when I watched, I remember watching Rushmore and going, oh, this is different and that's cool. And what a weird character. And, but I think probably the first film where I'm going, oh, this is Wes Anderson would probably be The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And I remember I was into it when it came out. After that, though, I got to admit, Moonrise Kingdom. And I think that would be my favorite. But like I said, Royal Tenenbaums, I couldn't get into. The French Dispatch, 5 minutes and I'm checking out. What was the other one? The hotel one?
Royal Hotel
Budapest, whatever, that Budapest Hotel.
I'm old. I can't remember these things. Grand Budapest Hotel. Sorry.
Thank you. That I want to give another shot to. Willing to try that one again. But I that would be my take. But let me ask you this then. Sure. Asteroid City, where does it rank for you? Is this a bottom half of his, top half? Or is it a maybe top third, middle third, bottom third?
I'd say for me it would be bottom third, and the reason why I think is the
bottom third DMG.
The story within the story. I found that I was interested in the color story. There's two phases here. There's the color and the black and white, and I was interested in the color story as a story. I thought it was fairly strong. These people sort of stranded in this small town or the small desert town. Looks great. It's obviously painstakingly rendered. But it is basically a play that you're watching, and there's all this stuff going on after, and they let you
almost
know
like
this.
A play in a play.
Play in a play. And I don't mind a story within a story, regardless of the form. True Detective season 1 was amazing, and that was basically a story within a story. So I don't mind that as a motif, but I recently went to the opera. They had the Manitoba Opera. They had a thing called Liqueur, Likeur, and basically an opera about Louis Riel. But the story itself, the historical story, is interesting, but you had it. Grandmother and a granddaughter talking about the story, and the grandmother was telling the granddaughter the story, and that part totally lost me. Like I often, it sort of. So in this case, Asteroid City, that whole format, there's a greater distance there that it creates, and so you think, well, why am I watching this play? I sort of didn't get it. I know he's probably trying to say something, this is his 11th film, trying to say something about storytelling itself. And, I saw it in the summer. I didn't get it. And I watched it again this weekend. I still didn't get it. I'm not sure what he's aiming for.
Yeah. It's kind of why I went with this,
yeah.
because I'm with you, Jim. I found this film, okay, unlike Napoleon, I kept watching. I was always engaged.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, maybe riveted isn't necessarily the right word for a Wes Anderson film, but this was, and episodic isn't the, I was forever kind of going, well, what happens next? What happens next? I was watching, but it was pleasant.
Yeah.
There was a part of me kind of going, if it wasn't for the aesthetic, and I do mean as part of his aesthetic, his actors and the way he has them play. Because a Wes Anderson performance, I think, is a very particular thing. But if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure I'd watch this movie. And so all of a sudden, is this something where it's, wow, there's something interesting going on here? Or is it just, cute is the best word I can come up with for now, And yeah, for myself, I'm like, there's no, going back to that story definition, it's like, okay, thank God the characters, the heroes are interesting. He is very effective, or at least this film is very effective at getting me interested in all this collection of quirky weirdos.
Yeah.
And because it's in a world where it's like, no, everyone's like this. It's not, oh, look at how I'm quirky. I'm an outsider in the larger film universe. It's like, no, everyone's like this. And I was buying it. I was interested, and I care about the characters and everything. But at no time are you ever worried about any of them. Most of them have no goals. Like, they're stuck in this town, and it's like, oh, well. And then some weird part of the framing device, it's like, are you sleeping if you don't go to sleep? Or, and honestly, it's one of those, oh, for sakes, some arty yet, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Is this like not a Deus Ex Machina solution, but this is a Deus, God from the machine giving you a reason to keep. It's not solving any problems. It's not, oh my goodness, a rescue. It's more shouting from the machine saying, listen, what's really going on here is this, so you don't have to worry that might be stupid. Trust me, I'm the God from the machine. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not I'm not landing that joke, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, there were elements of this that I really enjoyed. I thought the whole Tom Hanks, Jason Schwartzman, I would like to have seen a little bit more of that relationship, the father-in-law and the son-in-law that historically hadn't gotten along, and they're sort of united over the death of the wife/daughter,
or that they even have to actually come to some rapprochement in there.
Yeah,
but you don't feel that. It's like, I've never liked you, but I like my daughter, and she must have seen something in you. And Schwartzman smokes a pipe, and then later, so I guess we're all good now. Yep. It's like, what? And like, there's no conflict.
Well, it's a funny thing too, because on the other hand, he avoids a lot of that sort of that weeping and gnashing of teeth. There is sadness, and there is dealing with tragedy. There's people that are struggling, but rarely is it like, if you watch a movie from the 1950s, it's all like, hand to the head and, quivering voices and things like that. This is like the opposite of that sort of American or North American brand of melodrama, where everyone's just kind of like, hands in pockets and like, yeah, I guess we got to deal with this. And
Yeah, but
I
it's
sort
kind
of
of the
find that,
other extreme, though, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
to a
it
point where
can be,
there's
yeah.
no, like, in this one, like, we've talked about some of his other films, and it's like you feel these characters butt heads.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I mean, there's a couple of conflicts, not even amongst the characters you care about, more with the military.
Yeah, yeah.
A guy with the unfortunate braided hair. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it just, I guess the thing that draws me to him is that nobody makes films like he does, and that can be taken a lot of ways. But usually it's kind of a fun experience, and this one had its moments. Ultimately, it didn't really do it for me, but yeah, it's sort of like, for me, it's like Radiohead or in terms of music, it's like nobody does things like this guy, and even to the point where you bring in actors, and it's kind of exciting to see an actor like Bruce Willis, bringing him into Moonrise Kingdom, and all of a sudden he's got to sort of wear this Wes Anderson cloak of kind of invisibility, and it brings out some, like Dillon, seeing Matt Damon. I almost said Matt Dillon in this was kind of fun because all of a sudden he's plopped, in as sort of a stagehand slash mechanic.
But that's all like the aesthetic,
yeah,
and again, boy, the guy can write aesthetic. Like I said, I was always engaged, and I think part of the reason I was engaged is the aesthetic and the characters are human beings. You really feel they're real, and even though they can be irritating and they're irritating each other, I am not irritated by them. This isn't Napoleon.
yeah.
Yeah. But a quick DMG's chimed in the chat on a couple of things, but one he loved Grand Budapest Hotel and French Dispatch. This is interesting. He says Asteroid City was one of his most anticipated films of the summer, but he has not seen it yet. He says he hasn't heard anyone tell him, you got to see this flick.
Yeah.
And he also hasn't heard anyone say it's one of the best flicks of the summer. And I think we've kind of answered some of that, but now I'm going to go talk out of the other side of my mouth, Jim, and maybe you'll agree with me. I'd still say it's worth seeing.
Yeah, I mean,
he does interesting things that Ridley Scott did not do. Making a high quality, unengaging story, no matter how high quality it is, it's still a bland, boring meal. No matter how nice the plate is, no matter how nice the room you're in, no matter how good the service is, it's a bland, boring meal. That is not a Wes Anderson film. Here I am finding things lacking in the meal, but everything else, or let's say the meal here is really light, but it's so beautifully presented. The ingredients are great. I'm still kind of walking away feeling good about it.
Yeah.
So yes, DMG, it's on Prime. It's only 107 minutes. It never drags.
And there's tons of different people in it, and there's almost too many balls in the air, but there's a lot going on, but and it's got a great.
Do you think that's part of the problem here? Going back to
for me,
that
the distance of that storytelling thing, and the fact that there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Even if he has sort of willed, it's not his nature. That's like saying, maybe you don't have everything symmetrical.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion. Why don't you shoot it at an angle, like diagonal?
Well,
It's
I don't know. You
that
look at Moonrise Kingdom. I mean, I was fine with it's a Wes Anderson movie, but he
yeah.
keeps it a lot leaner. It's about the little boy and about Bruce Willis and his affair with Florence McDormand. That really is it, and everyone else is great characters conflicting with those three or four people.
I gotta watch that again.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it in a while.
That's a sweetheart. It's got all his quirks, but a heart and real conflict, real stakes. Like, I mean, you still do have a little boy that might be shipped off to yet another home. Or actually, wasn't the threat not even a home, but to a boy's home, like to an institution. Bruce Willis is, the affair he's having is falling apart. And that they find each other and are able to make a home.
Yeah.
I'm getting all choked up. I never once got like in the feels about this flick.
Yeah.
It's a weird little dream, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, there's just that distance that's unfortunate. And having said that, I just realized I would like to watch a Wes Anderson movie about Napoleon. That was in the cards. I don't think it would interest him, but boy, it sure would be interesting.
I think that what we were talking about was it today or maybe
I think so, yeah.
some other time about the Wes Anderson Star Wars. The Wes Anderson American Revolution.
Well, I was thinking one of the lines I wrote down is like Wes, in the desert with aliens. This is pretty much Wes Anderson's Nope. So I thought you'd like that one.
Is it maybe not Wes Anderson's Nope, or Nope meets Close Encounters of the Third Kind? It's Wes Anderson's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
Or E.T.
Yeah.
Given the subject matter and worldviews changing. Really? How?
Yeah.
None of these people seem to changed at all.
Yeah, and the other thing too that sort of that we haven't really talked about is that these movies, these short movies that he's got on Netflix now, that I've watched a couple of them, and they're interesting, but I probably should watch. I tend to watch them late at night when I'm pretty sleepy, so I should probably watch. I think there's one that's a long one, and the three others are literally 17 minutes each. So, but that's sort of an interesting experiment as well. But
is that maybe what's going on here? Because I gotta admit, I'm like, you in the film going, I had a nice time. I'm not sure I'm gonna remember this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what the point of it all was.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has something to do with. And it might be that, being his 11th movie, that it's a personal take on storytelling and the sort of the mechanics of that. But it's not something that necessarily sort of interests me in particular. At the end, what was the little phrase that they kept on repeating is that you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep, and they sort of chant that out like you might see in a really on the nose play, like a theater play.
That's what I meant. Like, it's almost like a Deus Ex Machina of this is the point here, in a kind of weird, like it's like a bit of a shell game. Oh, you're not understanding it, so we'll make it still odd and confusing, but if you still don't get it, it's your fault. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And that's another thing. And maybe, Jim, if you wouldn't mind explaining, it is a weird kind of framing device. You do have a play within a play. mind explaining it for us? Anyone who's, of course, we're in the spoiler zone, but for
Sure.
because I think sometimes you can miss those framing devices even when you're watching them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then did you find it added value to the story or added confusion?
Just to explain it, is that it's sort of a work. When we first start the movie, it's a work in progress. And Ed Norton is the writer, and he's even casting it. So Jason Schwartzman sort of charms his way into Ed Norton's. Do we know the name of the actor even? But so he's the actor. He charms his way into Ed Norton's place where he does his writing.
Do you mean the name of the
his character's name in the play is Augie,
but it was Schwartzman. Yeah. I'll get that answer for you, but continue.
Sure, yeah. So and it's sort of intimated that he sleeps his way into the role and gets the role, and then bam, it switches to color, and we're in the play, right? So, and all along there's little cuts where they come back to this theater. And you see Adrian Brody's backstage. He's the director, I guess, and he's sort of broken up with his wife or girlfriend, and he's living in the theater.
Hall.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah.
Jones Hall.
Jones Hall, playing Augie.
Playing Augie.
Yeah. So you have the black one, and there's a number of times where
Jason Schwartzman playing Jones Hall, playing Augie Steenbeck.
Steenbeck, that's it, yeah. So, you have a number of times where
course is a film editing.
Yes.
Like old school film editing equipment. Yeah.
But he comes off stage and he's taking off his fake beard, or he's taking off his fake mustache, and in a sort of a dramatic way. So that, we're reminded a number of times that he's an actor playing a role in Asteroid City. And often there was even one scene where he walks to the back wall of a crater, and there's a little sort of a little divot, and he opens it up, and it's the door to the backstage, right? And then he comes out, and it goes from color to black and white. So that's the kind of the thing. But there's long stretches of play. You tend to even forget that that's what it's about. And so that's the sort of the setup of it. But,
and unlike well, actually, I was always more relieved when we got back to the play once we returned to Asteroid City, because once we came out, it's like, oh, this doesn't make any sense, and the director doesn't make any sense, and apparently he's going through a divorce. Sure. But I suppose, and this, maybe it is not just a commentary on storytelling, but, this is where I was at, because this feels autobiographical.
Yeah.
Not to me, the story inside, but the story outside, the rapper, the playwright, and the production. And I'm like, that's a little much, Mm-hmm. I'm not... Or maybe it isn't that it's a little much. It's been done better by other people. I think Christopher Nolan does a really good job of going, hey, this is the filmmaker's experience, while making sure that he understands that me, as the paying public, should be entertained during it, not confused.
But that's the thing. Do you care ultimately about this? You can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. Is that something like that, or even just the notion of storytelling, or the commentary on storytelling? Like it sort of didn't really, draw me in that aspect of it.
Well, if it is a commentary on storytelling, Jim, what Mr. Chboyko, is he saying about storytelling?
Yeah, I genuinely mystified. Like I thought about that when I saw it in the summer. And just watching it again, I was like, I went over my notes from the summer, and it's pretty much the same, the same things that I
Yeah,
thought back in July
that's
or
it. It's
whatever.
like,
You know, just like,
what is he saying here? I mean, some of this, it's almost like if he's saying anything else, and I'm not sure he is,
Mhm.
but if he is, it's a commit to that bit, you know, and I may watch it again just to see if I can pull a bit more out
Mhm.
of it, as continuity's interrupted and everything.
Yeah,
Um, the juxtaposition of the pictures, the
yeah.
star,
Well, even the way
all
it
that
ends,
stuff. Like,
even the way it ends is that it ends on the play. Like you don't
yeah,
come back into the black and white real world. It ends, it shows the grandfather, father, and son
yeah,
sitting at the counter, and then they get in the car and they
and the
they
little
leave.
girls, the witches,
Yeah.
you
Who
know.
are really great, by the way. I usually hate Hollywood casting kids, but they were kind of crazy and demented little girls. I thought they were great,
But I
but
think we see those kids, not those literal kids, but and I'm fine with that. Moonrise Kingdom had them.
mhm.
You know, the girls, brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
you know, were little animals, which
Mhm.
I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
Children are little animals. We were all little animals. um, but coming back to this, well, yeah, why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I watching this movie other than it's a pleasant diversion?
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas any of his other films, and maybe that's it, he's getting into a more mysterious, you know, more symbolic,
Yeah.
you know, damn, you know, and me, it's just me. I've always been a narrative guy. I don't like a movie that I have to do homework for. This, oh, I
Mhm.
better. I don't mind a movie where I have to return to get even more out of it,
Mhm.
but not a, oh, you need to study my work to truly understand it. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, why are we playing 3D chess? Why?
Yeah. Yeah. And it could
for
it could
the
be just that
for the
he
love of
wanted
all
to.
that's holy.
It could be just that he's tired of like you think at a certain point just the straightforward telling of a story is maybe not enough.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that he goes, oh, I better do some thing about
Or it could also
add
be
it.
that this one just didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know, they're not all home runs.
Hmm.
Jim, I wanted before we get back to our, of course, opinion on this, I do want to take in. I've got DMG put up a couple of comments that I'd like to bring up.
Certainly. Yeah.
He goes, was there any melancholy about the death of Tom Hanks' daughter?
Oh
And
yeah.
there is, and actually at the very end in the play where they talk through what was a cut scene, it's
Hmm.
like, oh, that gets you in the feels a little. But he does say, kind of like what we've been talking about, or at least I mentioned it. If not, sounds like it might have been too cute for its own good.
Yeah. I don't know if cute's the right word, but it might have been too,
Precious.
or like he just added a layer of complexity that didn't quite for me take anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like a bad Wes Anderson fan not being
Well,
able to come up with
this
more
is,
solid conclusions, but
but yeah, and Jim, you know what? That is something I really dislike about a film or a filmmaker. Yeah, it's like all of a sudden you got to feel bad about not getting it.
well I was
Or,
yeah
it's like,
yeah
geez Louise, it's like, Why is this on me now? DMG also. Oh, okay. This is more of a. Well, let's get the right effect here. DMG also says. As he put it here. I had a nice time, but I'm not sure I'll remember it. Do you mean like the Atom Project from Rob Reynolds? DMG, I am going to say no, not quite that. Not quite that. you know, and even though I'm kind of crapping on this film a little, I still think it's worth seeing, and I may have to see it again anyway. Although I got to admit, I may just say screw it and watch Moonrise Kingdom again, which I just
that's not a bad solution.
far
Stick
prefer.
with what you know.
Yeah, but I'll probably eventually I'll watch this again, and I suspect I'll still be entertained, but I also may come out of it even being more confused. So I don't know. Jim, Mr. Cheboyko, I do think we're heading into a world of final thoughts.
Sure.
Why don't you kick us off?
I'm just looking at my notes to see if I missed anything, but I think we covered most of it. Just threw it over the shoulder. It's the look of it is actually quite good. Recently I've really gotten into. I watched Loki, and I thought, what is it? One of the things that I like about it when my wife and I watched it, and I quite enjoyed this season. I thought, is it the color palette that I'm really digging? And for this one, pretty unique color palette, and I can kind of appreciate that. The other thing I was going to say was that I'm kind of I'm not a big tech guy, but I do take pictures. And the camera that Jason Schwartzman used, I think it's called the Swiss Mountain, the Mueller Swiss Mountain camera.
See if we can zoom in on
something to that. I actually,
Mr. Cheboyko, I might even. Oh, you know what?
It's not real. They made that for the movie.
Yeah.
And they do this, and the detail that goes into some of his stuff, like even just things like the fonts. You know, the graphic design of the movie, which sounds strange to say, but the graphic design within the movie, the vending machines, the signage at the hotel, all that kind of, it's just, classic, that detail that they pour into it. I once made a comment on the font, all the fonts that you saw on Isle of Dogs, the Japanese fonts, the English fonts, the sort of the international thing. And somebody thought I was criticizing me. He was like, "Oh, how dare you?" But I was like, "No, dude, I love them." I thought it was amazing, an amazing display. But yeah, there's effort put into this. I mean, the story sort of, there was elements of the story that worked for me, unlike, say, Napoleon. And combined with that, there's always something to like in a movie, right? And this one, the visual, all the little Easter eggs and the color palette and the sort of the visual world that they create is
again
kind of amazing.
That very clear, very unique to Wes Anderson aesthetic. Although, I do. I like that Loki reference. So I think Loki's going for a darker, moodier thing.
Yeah.
But they're coming from the same, or very similar design places. You got almost like a mid-century. Yeah. Mid-century modern and mid-century Art Deco. That kind of art. Art Deco or our thing we label Art Deco seems to come back every 30 or 40 years.
Or that sort of futuristic, that plastic shell computer kind of thing, or what's the, not laundromat, but what's the thing that used to
the automat.
Automat, automat kind of thing, New York in 1950.
Well, so. and this had, so you could, Steve Carell in a great little truly supporting role. But one of his vending machines will sell you, well, not land, but a share in the town. Some convoluted thing. But that
Yeah.
reminds me, and Jim, you may remember this. You could buy life insurance in a vending machine
No,
in airports, even into the 80s.
that's crazy. I didn't remember that, but yeah, it doesn't
You
surprise
could
me.
you could pump in a few bucks and buy life insurance for that flight. A shameless, absolutely shameless way to
Capitalismo.
calculate, capitalize on people's paranoia,
Yeah.
and people's nervousness about flight. And he kind of does that with all his little vending machines, which is really quite entertaining.
Yeah.
And and I'm not even sure how to take this for myself. I guess I still have a number of thoughts, but to kind of keep it brief. One, and this is something that held me back from watching. It's like, oh my goodness, this is going to be, it's the Southwest United States. There's a lot of indigenous people, and it doesn't look like there are any. And that is a legitimate criticism of Wes Anderson's aesthetic, And here it was again. You had one character that was presented as indigenous in it felt like a stereotypical way. And almost, you're all part of the quirky set dressing.
Yeah.
But there's two Asian American characters, and they're the ones who they have to sleep in a tent. The army really picks on them. The kid, and there I'm like, I don't think this is. I'm going to make fun of these two Asian Americans. There it's like, this might actually be, not necessarily making a comment.
Yeah.
But showing these people as they're full characters and all that, but they're also being singled out. And not in a with those two characters, it never felt problematic at all.
And you could argue that it gave him bigger roles too, because they had to get a bit fighty. Ricky Cho, I think, and even Jeffrey Wright, the general, says, "Well, it's been a fine week, except for my disagreements with Ricky Cho, who's like a teenager." And the kid goes like, "What?"
Well, he's also the one who is able to. Well, all the junior stargazers had to get in on the heist, but he's the one with a journalistic collaborator on the outside of the quarantine zone. He is the one who breaks the story.
Yeah.
You criticized your principal. I was in grade 6. But I think that felt real and not. At no time were those two characters stereotyped. And I thought that worked for me. That really worked for me.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Boy, we this is a weird one. We can say see it, but may need to. It's one of those ones where it's like it's not a rave, but I almost feel like you see it, you may need to see it again, and
drop some hallucinogenics. No, I'm just kidding. I would never suggest that.
I don't think we really answered sort of the general question I put in general, but maybe this is something we can come back to. This film certainly does show you what aesthetic means. In difference, as different from the story, the narrative, that it's clearly a way to tell. You could apply this aesthetic to any story and you're going to come out with a different experience, but the themes will be the same. The, characterizations in many respects will be the same. Wes Anderson has a very clear aesthetic, a very unique to him aesthetic. But I'm not sure. And here's a movie where it's part of what keeps you in. What is he saying with his aesthetic? Or is that the real commentary? Like, has it always been, as he's brought more of this kind of proscenium arch, is that his films are also, like Christopher Nolan's, commentaries on storytelling? And it's not in the obvious in the story of it, but in the aesthetic and these cheats that he's really saying, this is how we view the world, or at least how Wes Anderson views the world. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think I'm getting a little arty-farty there, but...
Well, what is the phrase that they use for cigarettes? They call it a nicotine delivery system, and maybe it's just Wes Anderson's, story delivering system. That's how, that's the form it takes.
Yeah.
A lot of people use Dollhouse, or I heard another one recently.
There, quick air horn, Shashank Vachari's in the house.
Oh, hey.
Okay, back
hey,
to
man,
you,
how you doing? Yeah, no, it's just sort of maybe it's just the route that it takes. I'm not entirely sure. Like, I'm up for it. And like I said, a lot of his movies all go to the theater first day for. This one I didn't see on the first day, but while it's in the, I made sure to see it in the theater, but that's just me. But yeah, it's maybe that's what makes him interesting. It's a poser, isn't it? Why he does it? Why, and I was thinking to myself while watching this the second time, I wonder if he did just something straight up, like what it would be like just to watch him do like a, not like a Lifetime movie, but a Christmas Hallmark movie. But no.
Well, have we seen that though? Rushmore.
Yeah.
Although
maybe going back to Bottle Rocket,
where there's a Bottle Rocket, Rushmore.
Yeah.
But even in Rushmore, you also have a play within the movie, within the the story. So yeah, I think we may have to come back, if not to this movie, maybe we have a conversation about Wes Anderson and aesthetic. Because there's this is what I'm trying to figure out, is like it for myself.
Yeah.
What's honestly, Jim, there's part of me that just wants to go, what the is going on here? What's happening? I don't get it, and I want to get it.
What are the kids up to?
Yeah, what is this Wes Anderson up to? I want to stop shrugging. All right, Jim, always a pleasure. DMG, who do we got in the house? We've got DMG, we've got Shashank Vachari, we have Jelly Duck 100. Thank you all very much for coming out. And over to this side is some stuff you can watch. Of course, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to, Jim, ringing that bell.